everybody. Good morning, everybody. This is David Littman with Training Magazine Network, and welcome to today's session. We'll get started in just a moment. I want to do our typical Training Magazine pregame announcements for you here. But first, I do want to welcome you to our session today. It's another flipped webinar, and we'll explain that to you shortly for those of you who are new to the concept. Knowing your subject matter experts with Peggy Salvatore and Michael Kolowich. Before we get started here, I just wanted to, hello. Technical difficulty on my end there. Sorry about that. There we go. So just a few upcoming events that we have as part of this, our Training 2015 Conference and Expo preview, as this webinar is as well. On January 29th, we have our favorite friend Tiagi and Tracy Tagliati coming back with another affair with Lola, live online learning activities, how to be more interactive in your sessions. And then on February 5th, we have two exciting webinars, some learning metrics that you're not using but should, with Jeff Grissensthwaite of Knowledge Advisors. And also, Cindy Huggett on that day is going to be doing part one of her Design and Deliver Interactive and Effective Online Learning. She's the author of the Virtual Training Guidebook, so she has a lot of great things to say about that topic. Do come back for those. And again, just as a quick reminder, if you go back to trainingmagnetwork.com, you can always find the calendar of all of our upcoming webinars, as well as our recorded webinar archive. So for example, recording of this session and other great sessions and free white papers. One nice thing to note, we always put all the newest stuff right at the top of the list there in the recorded webinar archive. So it makes it really easy to find. And of course, all the events are right there on the homepage as well. So do check that out at trainingmagnetwork.com. And it's coming up. We're getting real excited. We are coming up in Atlanta, our 38th annual training conference and expo. If you're going to be in Atlanta, please do show up, or even if you can just make it to Atlanta. It's not too late to come. It's also not too late to save $250 on registration with that discount code. You might want to write that down, TNET, real easy to remember. And of course, you have all the information for that available at trainingconference.com. And of course, our sponsor today, Knowledge Vision, they will be at Training 2015, and Michael will be there. Michael, do you want to say a few words about what they can expect from you guys over at the conference in Atlanta?
Well, we will indeed be there. We're really looking forward to it. And at the conference, number one, we're going to be showing a lot of new capabilities and state-of-the-art online presentation tools in the whole Knowledge Vision line. And I'll also be speaking about how to use those tools, including our new tablet application, the iPad, to collect information and knowledge from the subject matter experts. So it's very relevant to the topic that we have here. And I look forward to doing something really hands-on there in that session.
Excellent. And I realized I'm not showing you my slides. All right, there we go. Now we should be able to see it. So making sure that you join us in Atlanta for the Training 2015 Conference and Expo. Excellent. And of course, we want to thank Michael and Knowledge Vision for sponsoring such a great speaker as Peggy today. Please do check them out at knowledgevision.com to learn more about the different tools and options for producing events just like this. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and get us back to Peggy and Michael. Michael, before we get started, I know you wanted to share a little bit possibly about this whole format, the format of the Flip webinar. We've done another webinar on the Flip webinar back in November, but some people may be new to the concept. If you want to help orient us to what we're going through today.
Sure, just to orient you a little bit, this is a kind of an application of the flipped classroom model to a webinar setting. So just as in the flipped classroom, you distribute the lecture materials in advance and then use your valuable time together for kind of a more interactive Q&A session or for exercises and the like. We're doing the same thing here. So most of you should have, when you registered, gotten an email linking you to the presentation, the online presentation. So hopefully you've been able to hear Peggy talk about various types of SMEs and the like. And now this is the interactive session. So if you haven't seen that presentation, you have the choice to kind of stop this session, go over and watch Peggy's presentation, and then come back here for the end of the Q&A, or if you want to stay for the Q&A, you can. But the whole Q&A session will be recorded, so right back on this page, you'll be able to look at both at part one, that presentation, and this Q&A session as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. And good morning, Peggy. How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you, David?
I'm doing very well. So we have a number of questions that have already come in off of your excellent presentation, and people had some things they wanted to follow up with. And we're going to start with those. And then, of course, for those listening, there is an option here for you to ask questions now as we go, or questions that you maybe didn't have a chance to put in before. So please do add those in, and we'll get to those as we have our time together today. But I'm going to start with a question from Sarah C. She asked, do you send SMEs pre-work or questions ahead of time, or do you prefer to wait until you meet face-to-face? What are the best practices for this? They feel that would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Sarah. And before we start, I wanted to thank you, David, and also to thank Michael for this opportunity to talk about this subject that's near and dear to my heart. In fact, the reason I wrote the book is because I couldn't find this kind of information when I was doing training programs, and I kind of did it as a lessons learned or a post-mortem after a couple of years of projects where these kinds of issues kept coming up. So to answer Sarah's question, do I send SMEs pre-work? Do I send them questions ahead of time? Yeah, I really do, and I address this in the book. Especially if I think that the subject's going to be difficult, I'll ask them for pre-work so that I can prepare. They might have slides from a presentation they've done. They might have articles they've written. They may have best practices and they've codified it and they've stored it somewhere. So we want to see that, and you want to know that ahead of time. That helps you focus your questions, and it allows you to do a little more homework. You might see things in there, possibly definitions you don't understand. You can look those things up on your own. Then you're asking more informed questions, and you're using your time much better with your SME. I really advise you do not go unprepared into a session with a subject matter expert. Find out who they are, find out what they've done. I have had some pretty funny situations going in unprepared. I talked about a little bit of that in the pre-work. If you go back and see the pre-work that we sent to you, it can be comical, but you also don't want to waste people's time. So yes, definitely do your homework, be prepared, get some questions ahead of time so that you're using your time with your subject matter experts really well. You may not get them again.
Right, exactly. Well, as a follow-up to that, do you have a set of questions that you use for most information gathering sessions?
It is a great follow-up question. It really ties into the previous question. And again, I get into this a little bit in the book, but it's something I learned as a newspaper reporter. I do have a standard opening questions and a couple standard closing questions, and they're really good ones to use. For example, for a first question, simple stuff. Get their name right. Get the spelling of their name, their title, their division, their business unit, contact info, especially if you're an outside contractor. If you're internal to an organization, you might have access to those things. But if you're external to an organization, you want to double check those things. You may not have that at your fingertips. It's really good to be able to know that you got it right. And as for my standard last question, I always ask them, what didn't I ask you? Is there something that you can think of that the learners need to know about this topic, and I didn't ask you? I didn't know to ask you. And you'd be surprised how many times you get some great information from that last question. That last question can be really valuable. You want to find out what would you like the learner to know we haven't covered? Their mind sometimes goes someplace else that you might not have thought of, because remember, they're the subject matter expert. They know their stuff a whole lot better than you do. As for the messy middle, I talk about this a little bit, and it goes to the first question. If I don't know the topic or the person, I'm going to study materials ahead of time, and I'm going to make sure that I ask some really good targeted questions in the middle. So yes, I can talk a little more about that, but I don't know if we want to get on to some more questions. I want to make sure that we answer everything.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we can always come back and I may ask you the same question.
That's right.
Didn't we ask? Because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. So, yeah. Oh, excellent. Well, Michelle is asking, what do you find to be the most challenging type of SME and why?
This was such an easy question for me to answer. Definitely, the most challenging SME is the one who's too busy. If they're they may be really busy at their own job and having to do this. Usually they are. They're the subject matter expert. They're busy. They're valuable to the company. And when they're asked to come in on this and do this with you, it's an imposition. Even if it's important to them, they usually don't have time. So the most challenging SME is the one who is too busy to be doing the job of working on the training program with you. And they're the worst not because they don't care. They usually care a whole lot. But it's hard to get their appointment with them. It's hard to get them to keep the appointment. It's hard to keep their attention when you've got them. And it's really hard to get them to review the material afterward. And this is just a personal preference. This is my personal bugaboo. Is this person is most difficult because this is the hardest thing for both of you to overcome. If they don't have enough hours in the day and you can't change that, they may not be able to delegate this to somebody else. So sometimes the whole project can go on hold waiting for these people to become available. And I was thinking of one situation. I'm going to read this actually because I had written this up to describe what had happened in a situation. I wrote some educational materials for administrators of a state program, and we wrote brochures on how to assemble nonprofit boards and do things like that. And it was really difficult to get these people to review them, to get their approvals and their sign-offs, because we were working with people in the state capitol, and they had a lot of other things going on, a lot of things tugging at them. And we were in Philadelphia, out of sight, out of mind, and these projects have timelines. Resources are lined up. You have schedules that have to be met. You have training requirements that are usually scheduled ahead of time. Sometimes these programs are needed on a certain week because there might be regulatory issues. These people, you are really under pressure, and you've really got to get these people, you've got to get their attention. And so I just do find it to be the very, very hardest thing, is your subject matter experts are your most important people. They are really busy, and if you can get their time and attention, you've really got something. But that's the challenge, definitely.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And well, Dale had quite a few comments to make here. First was thanking you, of course, for the useful tips on dealing with SMEs. There's lots of great stuff in there. In the section on the not quite expert SME, you recommended to loop in other knowledgeable people, but Dale felt it might be helpful to talk about the best way to do that. In Dale's experience, you never would go. You go behind a SME's back, right? You would ask the SME that you're working with if there's anyone else they'd want to weigh in on the content, for example. He had a concern about or he or she actually. I'm not sure if Dale's male or female, so forgive me. I'm concerned if inexperienced designers would act independently and undermine trust. Mm-hmm. And on the review front, always asking the SME who they would recommend to proof the content, and always do dry runs before the content's put out. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, there is really a lot in this question.
There's a long one.
I think there's a whole chapter in the book that addresses all the issues that go into this question. And I think I'm looking at my notes here because there was so much. I actually had written out quite a bit in answer to this person's question. First of all, you might get I'm actually going to read my answer because I want to make sure I really address this person's issues. And if you find you have a SME that isn't an expert, you really need to try to address it with the person themselves if it's possible. Because sometimes if you're lucky and the SME doesn't know what they're doing, they're going to tell you up front they're not the right person. And it gives you both a good place to start to find the right person. And you are right, you never want to go behind anybody's back because you don't want to undercut their trust. Having their trust is such a huge issue in terms of getting what you need, really getting information from your subject matter expert. And a lot of your subjects aren't just like general chemistry. I mean, some of your subjects can be very personal. You can be working with subject matter experts on very, very difficult personal leadership type management issues where you need to have a level of trust with that person to be able to get what you need. So yes, do not go behind anybody's back. If there's a problem, get it out front. And also, these can be really sensitive political situations. If you don't have the right SME, things aren't going well, you have to tread very, very carefully. And one of the things somebody mentioned to me they were reading the first draft of the book, and we were talking about getting a SME who might say to you, I'm not the right person, I'm not the right SME, I don't really know what you need in order to write your program. And she said to me, well, sometimes they are the right person, but they're just telling you they're not because they're trying to get off the hook. And they don't have the time, they don't want to be doing it, but they are the right person. They're just telling you they're not. That's another one, and that can happen. And she wouldn't bring it up if it didn't happen. I don't know a really good way to sort out if they're the right person. If you aren't on the inside of the department, if you aren't on the inside of the company, sometimes there's no real way to know that. But it's worth mentioning, because if someone tells you they aren't the right person, you need to enlist their help to get the right person.
Right.
And if you have a SME and you aren't getting what you need, they might not want to admit it, because they could be having their own issues about security, job security, and in those cases, you really have to document it. You have to document you're not getting what you need. You have to go to your boss and talk about that and say, look, these are the questions I've asked them, this is the material I'm getting, and they're not quite the expert we thought they were. You need to document it, and you need to be very careful about working with them, not working behind their back. Absolutely, agreed. Because your reputation's on the line, the trust that they would have.
Sure.
Yeah, the trust they'll have working with you, very important. So.
Absolutely, you want to maintain that, yeah. Dale also mentioned graphically that the segment didn't necessarily possess the diversity and gender neutrality that is believed to be required for today's era. That all the subjects were Caucasian, and the power problems were male, while the disorganized, overwhelmed, and powerless were female, and that kind of thing. Do you want to address that as well?
You know what? I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you. I'm going to turn you up because I know we turned you down before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, and I can speak up as well.
Yeah.
He was mentioning that graphically the segment didn't necessarily possess the diversity and gender neutrality that they might expect. Also, that to watch out for issues where, like the people with the power problems are all male and Caucasian versus the disorganized and powerless ones were female.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting comment from one of our viewers. And first of all, we want to apologize if we offended anybody. It certainly wasn't our intention. And we have some incredibly, phenomenally organized women on this project, for example. I'm thinking about some of the people at Knowledge Vision that are just incredible women and incredibly high functioning and fabulous. So, yeah, we didn't mean to offend anybody. We apologize, and it kind of raises our level of sensitivity to diversity and stereotyping. And we actually appreciate that. Let's face it, power tripping, being disorganized, it crosses racial lines, it crosses gender, ethnicity, but no, please. that was it was an interesting comment, yeah.
Yeah, always good to be sensitive to that, for sure.
Yeah.
And then Paige was asking, will you be providing a one-picture job aid with the SME behavior type, for example, defensive, and the bullet point tactics? She felt that would be very helpful.
Oh, Michael, we were looking at this, I think, before we got on. We provided that we have like a one-pager, right?
No, exactly. So, first of all, I should say that Knowledge Vision has arranged with Peggy to actually, she's brought up her book several times, and we want you guys to have that. And we've taken a substantial excerpt from that book. And we're going to be emailing it out in PDF form to everybody who registered for this webinar. So watch for that in your email. I think along with that, Sammy, is a copy of a kind of a one-page table that kind of summarizes the types. And you have that. Can you show that to us? Okay, I thought she had it ready, but in any case, you will. Okay, I think that's up now. We think it's up.
Do we have it?
There.
I think we have a picture of a two-page PDF that was a side-by-side.
Yeah, but in any case, in any case, we have that real quick table that'll help you kind of refer to it and look at the different tactics. So we hope that you find that really useful.
Great, thank you for that. And Paige mentioned that she really likes this flipped approach. So thank you, Paige, for feedback. Julie was asking, do you have recommendations for us who has come to their position through a long and varied career, and they're convinced that you can only get that type of expertise by following the same path, whereas you don't necessarily have time to grow your own person through all those experiences. That needs to know the key pieces of learning. We should give someone who's coming in with reasonable beginning skills and is going to work for like right now.
Yeah, Julie asks a great question, because that is absolutely something I think you run into with most subject matter experts. They know the hard path they travel to get where they are. They know the years of experience. So how do you boil that down? I mean, that's what we're doing as trainers, right? How do we take that kind of knowledge, boil it down, make it in little digestible chunks that we can bring other people up the curve? That's what training is, right? So I actually have, again, written out a couple of things, because I'm working with somebody right now who does succession planning, and this was exactly the issue he brought up. His company set up that they're grooming people internally over time to be able to sustain a very carefully designed corporate culture. They built this corporate culture over 13 years, and they make it a fun place to work, and they have all these fabulous things in place. And he's a great, bright, big picture guy, and they have plans A, B, and C in place to cover what you're addressing. Plan A is what you said. You're growing and grooming people inside. These are people that, they're in your succession plan. They're following in the footsteps of your CEO or in your experts, the guy who's heading the division, so they can take it over. You don't miss a step. But like I said, he's a smart guy. He's a big picture guy, and he's got Plan B. And Plan B is you insure those people. I mean, it sounds kind of macabre, but you have an insurance policy on these people, so that if something happens to somebody, you can go out and you can hire somebody at that level. You can hire the best people in the world to take over if you trip up on Plan A and your succession plan doesn't work out. But he also goes to Plan C, and his Plan C goes to your question. And that is that if he only had a little bit of time to quickly tell somebody everything they needed to know to run the company, he can do it in 10 minutes. He's come up with a list of what does he call them? He calls them thought provokers or something. But he has this list of basic knowledge that he could impart in 10 minutes, that if you use these basic principles, there's some wisdom on those pages, that if you took those broad principles and ran the company by those broad principles, you could kind of keep steering it on course. So I hope that answers your question, but it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing because that's the whole point, is we're trying to capture the knowledge and keep companies going that have broad, deep histories. And we are trying to capture that in little chunks and making sure that we have that continuity. It's a really hard thing to do. So I loved his approach of A, B, and C. And C was, give me 10 minutes. I can get anybody to keep this ship on course until they get everything straightened out. And that sent me off in another way of thinking about how do you get somebody to boil it down to 10 minutes. So that's sort of one of my next projects that I'm working on, is thinking about what kind of questions would you ask. And that's really where that's our job as trainers and instructional designers, is how do you get to that nub? How do you get to those little pieces, those little chunks of knowledge that you can pass them on, they're digestible, and they can keep everything running smoothly.
Well, and that's in a lot of ways also where online presentations come into play too, where if you can boil that down into something that they can give in a 10-minute presentation or 15-minute presentation, as we did with you, then that can be helpful. But sometimes with some people that comes naturally, and other people it takes some coaching.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So the 10-minute SME, that's your next book.
That is it really is. It has so much sent me off on. That question was so great because it so much dovetailed with the work I was doing with somebody right now, and I thought, yeah, how did he come up with those 10 minutes? We have to work on that because I think that's, yeah, good stuff. Definitely great question. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Well, Betsy asks, what can you do about, quote unquote, Ted the training expert, the SME who also thinks he's an expert in training and tries to dictate learning strategies in all parts of the training program? And if the SME really does have training expertise, that's great. But we're talking about those who think that they have the expertise but really don't.
Yeah. Well, I love TED because now we have 9. I think we had 8 before, right? We had eight types of SMEs, and now with TED we've got 9. And so thanks, Betsy. There are books written about this subject, which teach subject matter experts how to do instructional design. It's the flip side of what we're doing here. So there are some people who do this. There are books written. There are consultants who this is how they focus, is to teach them instructional design. But the reality is they aren't instructional designers. So some of what we've learned, how we've learned to think, you can't teach that in one book or in a minute. So the answer to the question is a couple things. One is, and actually I'm going to read the answer again because I saw a few things going on here. One is the SME that you're bringing into the classroom. They're doing live training for you. And so they can kind of become a loose cannon if they decide they're going off your facilitator guide or kind of going off course. So we have that. And then we have the one that just tries to take over writing the program. And again, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So when you bring a SME into the classroom to teach the material, there's a good reason you're doing that, because they have so much information tucked into their brain that you can write your program, write your facilitator notes, but there's so much in there that when they start working off your notes, all those little gems are going to come across in the classroom. So it's a good idea. If you can get a SME to teach a class, it's a great thing. But the thing is, you need to keep the SME using good classroom techniques, which is say, train the trainer kind of program for a SME, so they can learn best practices in the classroom. But for right now, I said I'm working with this retired executive, and we're writing a leadership book. He taught college-level classes, and he gave me his notes, and he had a couple pages of notes, and he taught whole classes. And he said to me at one point, well, why are we having these detailed conversations? And I said, because when you start talking, you put skin on the bones. You give me detail. You can see the richness of what you know. So I think getting SMEs in the classroom is good. I think letting them go off a little bit is good. The way to do that, though, is to make sure you've trained the trainer. In fact, recently I wrote a 2-day program. We did this last fall, and went into a life sciences company and are training. We are training actually the training department how to teach the class. But within that, we also have built another 90-minute module so that when the training department teaches the SMEs, we have a train the trainer component. So I think there are ways to keep your SME from going off, but you really need to learn how to train them to talk to the class. Also, the other thing I mentioned is that a SME who might try to take over the program, and they might try to dictate how to write the program, and this really gets down to good project management. When you're writing a training program, doing any kind of training program, project management is absolutely critical. And when you have a good project manager, they're going to keep those things under control. They're going to keep the people on track doing what they're supposed to be doing. I've seen some project managers that are phenomenal, and you wouldn't have these kind of issues because they are very good at managing their resources. So, and in fact, I think there's like a whole chapter in the book just on how to manage, just on great project management, how to do that. And there are also I see some more materials and books coming out now on how to manage training projects. I think it's a real trick, and it's a real trick for these very reasons of working with subject matter experts, of having all these moving parts and resources. And if everybody knows their role and you have a good project manager, people are going to play their role. People are going to do their part. They know what they're supposed to do. So, yeah, it's part of the project management, train the trainer. And I hope that answers the question.
Great, well, thank you. Yeah, no, it is really an art form in and of itself. It's true. A couple of logistical questions coming in. Maybe, Michael, you might want to chime in on this as far as how do they get a copy of the presentation that was shared in the original presentation?
Oh, yes, we've made a PDF of Peggy's presentation, and that will be posted on this page. So if you come back to this page, you're going to see two things. Number one is a PDF of the slide deck, and you'll also get the recording of this session as well as the original presentation. So all that'll be, right here on that on this page. Bookmark it, come back, and that should all be together by the end of today.
Great, thank you. And then Barb was asking if there's a hashtag for this discussion.
No, but we could start one.
We should.
Yeah. Good idea.
So you want to make one up, David?
Me? Oh, I don't know. On the fly, maybe not. I'm not that
Okay,
good.
how about no SMEs? KNOW SME. Actually,
Oh, very good.
know your SME.
I like that. All right, thanks. And then back to regular questions. Leon was asking, the webinar emphasizes the importance of having the SME review the final product. Oftentimes, the SME doesn't have time to review the material, so why not get another SME to review the content?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a great point. You should have other people review the material. There should be a series of sign-offs. But I think the SME you talk to really does need to look at the material too. They may have said something in there, and when they look at it again, they may say, it's not quite what I meant, or I forgot to tell you this, or they may put more context around it. The person who told you the original information, I really think needs to look at it. I also really think other people need to look at it. There needs to be sign-offs, because very rarely is the SME the person who is the person who's cutting the check, for example. The person who's in charge of the project. The SME usually is exactly that. They're your subject matter expert to come in and help put content into the training program. But you've got people involved in this process who have skin in the game, who are cutting the checks, who are doing, who may be other kinds of stakeholders. They need to see this information too, and they need to sign off on it. Otherwise, you could have a loose cannon SME. You don't want to have that. You really need to have a couple of layers of sign-offs. And there are sign-off sheets and things in the book. We could actually probably provide some of that too. I'll talk about providing some of those lists and checklists and things that address that. And again, that gets to project management. But I think the SME should see it. I think the SME you talk to should see what you've done.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes, as a follow-up question from Leon here, sometimes SMEs are adamant that everything be included in the module. What's the best way to convince SMEs that you're not oversimplifying the material, but that you're targeting the end user?
Yeah, that is so true, because they are subject matter experts. They know everything there is to know, and everything is important. They know that if you know this, then this is a qualifier. Subject matter experts are like that. They understand all the ifs, ands, and buts, so they think it all needs to be in there. And ultimately, when someone else becomes a subject matter expert, yes, they need to know all the ifs, ands, and buts too. But I think the best way to get a SME to understand that is to remind them how they learned it, is to remind them that it's building blocks, that you need some of the big essential pieces of information, and you need to teach that first so that people have a place to jump off to learn all those other pieces that are so important. And that's how adults learn, right? That's adult learning theory, is exactly that. When we learn a big piece of information, then we learn something else and we relate it to that. So we have to teach them, okay, we need to teach this in a systematic way. We need to teach the big blocks first and then the littler blocks on top of that. And remind them how they learned things. Remind them when they were in freshman Gen Chem, for example. You know, did they need to know, would they have even understood some of these other things? So to just get them to remember how they learned things and to remind them that it needs to be chunked out, the big important pieces first, and then the exams and buts kind of go on top of that.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, send them back to when they were beginning learners, so they can have some empathy for what it's like on some of the
Exactly.
on the other end. Yeah. Anne had an interesting question. She said, "I'd like to record conversations and presentations from SMEs. However, she's run into some anxiety about being recorded. She assured them that it's to capture their knowledge and that you don't want to miss critical information. But are there any other ways you could suggest putting them at ease, maybe in handling this objection?"
Well, I think that's really a good question for Michael, because I had a background in radio, but I never had a background in video. So Michael's and the Knowledge Vision folks have been learning how to put me at ease in front of a new medium. So I don't know, Michael, do you want to maybe help me with that one?
Well, again, you know, I think the key to that in doing interviews is, number one, you know, starting in a way that, you know, where you're asking easy questions and that are easy to answer. It's kind of like a deposition, right? You know, you spend the first 5 minutes on things that are really easy to answer, and you establish a personal rapport. But you know, if you can successfully do that, then you know, the camera or the recording device disappear, and it's just a conversation between two people. Now, sometimes when I'm doing an interview which is designed for for archival use, when somebody is clearly thinking about an answer as they go, as I am right now, I sometimes go back to them and say, "Can you give that back to me, a little bit more succinctly?" And the second time they go through that answer, it often comes out a whole lot better, because then they've gone through the process. But most of it is actually just making it a conversation, showing genuine curiosity, letting them know that you are learning and they're teaching you, and they tend to start taking you under their wing. And as soon as that happens, as soon as you start seeing that kind of caring teacher-student type of relationship, then the material flows a lot more comfortably and a lot more easily, is what I find.
Well, thanks. Well, Michael, since you're talking anyway, Peggy, I know that you had a follow-up question you wanted to ask of Michael. This might be a good time for you to do that.
Yeah, I did. It had to do with the preservation of knowledge. We need to capture knowledge and capture it in a way that we can preserve it for future generations. So when we're writing a training program, a lot of times we're writing a training program, we're going to deliver it in the next 6 months or a year, and so maybe sometimes this isn't an issue. But sometimes when you're capturing certain kinds of knowledge, you really want to preserve that for decades. Right? Or you're going to a lot of trouble to preserve something. So I wanted to talk to you, ask you a question really about the technology. Think about programs, e-learning programs that we wrote 10 years ago or 15 years ago that were on VHS, or they were on audio cassettes, and a lot of the
Laserdisc.
Yeah, right. So how do you, what do you? So let's talk about preservation of information over time. What are some of the best ways to do that? And the cloud, is the cloud the answer?
Right. So this has actually come home to me again really recently, when I had a conversation with a fellow who runs one of the great big projects in computing and artificial intelligence at MIT. I had done quite a bit of work with him 5 years ago, and then again 10 years ago. about kind of documenting this big project. And we realized that some of it was on VHS, some of it was on DVD, some of it was on XD-Cam, and HDV tapes, and etc. And it's really hard to go back to some of those formats. I mean, I even have old reel-to-reel tape things back from when I was in college in the early '70s that I wish I could play, because they have some amazing thought leaders on them, and so the good news for us now is that I do think that digital video formats, knock on wood, are here to stay. That we're no longer relying on physical media, and part of the challenge of going back is the limitations of physical media. Is it this tape or this DVD format, or remember the big floppy disks and then the little floppy disks and the all that various optical media. We mentioned laser discs. All of that is starting to be off the table because we do have tremendous amounts of material being stored in a standard format, which the current kind of state of the art for archival video is either MPEG-4 or QuickTime, H.264 codec, and but that's digital, and I think that digital archives are going to be around for a long period of time. There are certainly companies where you can store these things that you also have a sense that they're going to be around for a long period of time. I don't think Google is going anywhere, for example. And so I feel perfectly comfortable saving things, archival stuff on Google Drive, as just as an example, because and I also know that even though the resolutions of the resolution may change. Now we're going from HD to 4K, and who knows what the formats are going to look like. At this point, there is so much archival material being stored in the current formats that backward compatibility and backward readability without physical media is going to be really something that I think we can rely on over a period of time. What I would recommend, though, is that you not keep those things on physical media, as in tapes, over a long period of time. Number one, tapes degrade. Number two, you can't rely on the fact that there are going to be players around to play them. But when you get to digital media on hard drives, especially in cloud storage, then in effect you abstracted away the physical media limitation, and now you're just talking about the support of digital formats over a long period of time, and potentially transcoding those to whatever the format of the day is. But digital transcoding is something that can be done, automatically or kind of hands-off without requiring physical devices. So, I mean, that's a long way of saying I think that we've got much better ways to do this now through cloud storage and through standard video and document formats.
Great, thank you, Michael. I appreciate the answer. So another question that I think I can actually address. Kathy was saying she's interested in the Flip webinar aspect as well as the actual content, and she's wondering if the questions we're asking were ones that were sent in ahead of time or are they sending during the session, and the answer, of course, is both. We had some questions that came in after people watched the original broadcast, and then Now we're also getting questions real time, which is the advantage of this part of the session. You can get more interaction going. And she asked how many people are participating in this session, and I believe it's around 175 at the peak here. So I just wanted to address that. And then back to Peggy, Sarah was asking, can you talk about ways to resolve information discrepancies between SMEs? For example, SMEs have very different methods sometimes of performing the work and strong opinions that their way is the right way.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I think the answer is whoever cuts the check gets to make the decision. Seriously. I've actually ran into this. I ran into this about a year or two ago with competing SMEs. There was a big organization, and they had 5 different divisions, and they were all doing the same philosophy, management philosophy. They were all doing it a different way. They were all using a different consultant that had a different way of approaching this particular problem. And when they tried to combine the 5 regions or the 5 divisions into one, there was, I'm trying to find a nice way to say that they had 5 competing interests, and it was a long political process. So I don't think that there's a real easy answer to that. But I think if there has to be an arbiter, it's got to be the guy who's cutting the check. You've got to say, okay, you get to call it. But in this particular instance, what we ended up doing as a training company, coming in and looking at these 5 competing styles, was that we went out and hired our own expert in that particular field and let him look at everything and make some decisions, help us make some decisions. But there were a lot of political battles fought in that particular instance. I don't know if that answer helps, but yeah.
Great, no, thank you. It does actually. It kind of makes sense. You've got to go with who is the decision maker.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your stakeholders. Look at your stakeholders.
Yes. And because
so, a lot of times, there's people have agendas, and when people have agendas, they have to be taken into consideration, and that's why sometimes something that looks like a simple answer or looks like, oh, it's just this, it's not that. That's not always true, even if it's something that could be scientific or technical, or it would look like it had a straight ahead answer, it might not.
Thank you. Well, Joy was asking, how has the movement towards microlearning impacted this connection?
I think that could be for either one of us, but I am almost going to the kind of technology that Michael's using, and why that's so interesting is I think with microlearning, it's great because we can chunk out those little tiny bits, and I think it's really the future of training is microlearning and those little tiny bits, because it helps you, I think, put in the big blocks, do maybe some 20-minute training, half-hour training, full-day training to learn the basics, but it's those little pieces that help it stick. It's those little pieces that you can sort of add on to that knowledge. So I think microlearning is the future.
Yeah, one really successful program that one of our clients, who's a kind of major forward-looking car company, is doing right now is they are creating this series called 3 Minutes on X, and whatever the X is. And so there's clearly some preparation being done there. They're all subject matter experts, but basically they'll sit down with somebody and they might do 10 or 15 of these little kind of nuggets that are 3 minutes apiece, and the way they do it is that they do it through an interview that lasts exactly 3 minutes long. And then they take the video of that interview and they actually retrofit a presentation to it. So when that person is talking about this thing or this website or this resource or this process, they actually have a slide that shows that process. Or when they make a really key point, they actually take the quote that person is saying at that moment and put it up there on the screen. And these are very, very powerful little nuggets. And often I talk about kind of just-in-case learning and just-in-time learning. Just in case is things that you want to train people about ahead of time, in anticipation of what they're going to need. Just in time says having a way to find this stuff the moment you need it. Oh my God, I never thought I'd need this, but I have this situation now. How do I get quick coaching? They're actually able to use these kinds of micro segments, little nuggets, for for both of those types of cases.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. Fortunato asks, is it appropriate to invite a SME as a testimonial or enforcer, if you will, of the topic taught when you have a training session, to sort of bring them in? Do you think that works well, or?
Yes, and it kind of goes to a question we had earlier, which is it even appropriate to have the SME teach the class? So, yeah, because I think there's stuff in their heads that you're not going to capture in necessarily in the training program, and it's just really, it's very authentic. Sometimes even to have them open the session, say you're doing a live session, you're doing a day or a week training, have them come in, introduce the topic, and open the session, and it just lends power to the material, because they can usually bring it to life in the way that the instructor, facilitator is never going to bring that kind of passion to the subject.
Right. Well, that makes sense. The voice of experience. And Sharon was asking, what's your process for transferring all that recorded information or notes or whatever into training content? Do you create outlines or narratives? How do you get that information from their head and that you've recorded into something useful?
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking, again, you're always thinking about the latest project, right? And
right.
For me, it was, right now I'm just doing a lot of audio recording, and I'm actually doing a transcription, which I didn't think I was going to do for this client, but I'm actually transcribing everything just because of the type of language and the way that they word things. So I think that the answer is I usually try to record everything if I can. Audio, video's great, especially if it's visual. I think we've looked at things that Michael's done with, being able to bring in their slides and have them talk to their slides, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think the process, record it, transcribe it if you need to, and then go back. I always look for holes and always try to get back to them.
That makes sense.
And again, I think the notion of kind of the enhanced interview is also a really important one. Taking what would be a talking head and reinforcing it with supplemental material, actually creating slides based on that material retroactively. Putting in footnotes, dynamic footnotes that allow them to, allow the viewer to explore more material, to dive deeper into a topic as it comes up. The same way that they might, look at a sidebar in a magazine article if they're interested in going deeper into a subject. I think that's also a really important way of kind of packaging up this content that is kind of a little different from how it's traditionally been done.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah. Well, we're kind of getting towards the end of our session, and of course, there's way more questions than we're going to have time to answer in the session. I thought what I might do first is, before we continue, just allow both you, Peggy, and you, Michael, to let people know if they have further questions or want to get more information, what the best way to do that is, and then maybe we can have you both make a closing statement, essentially, to help wrap us up today.
Well, first of all, we'll try to get back to folks who've asked questions. I know you put your emails in, and so if you're asking specific questions, we'd encourage you to continue doing so. We'll try to get back to as many as we can. That's number one. Number two is I really do recommend that people who are interested in this whole topic of working with SMEs, pick up Peggy's book. Working with SMEs is actually available on Amazon. A Kindle version that you can get, that's how I got to know her. Was actually originally through her book, and then I said I gotta meet her, and I called her up, and we started working together with her. Kind of puzzling through some of these things with Knowledge Vision. And as I say, we've taken an excerpt of that book, and we are mailing it out to everybody who is on this call and everybody who's registered for the webinar.
Thank you, Michael. And Peggy?
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Michael, for that. The book actually is now available in print, soft and hardcover, as of Monday. So
congratulations, that's great.
And I have a website called www.workingwithsmes.com. And if you go to that, I blog on this subject once a week, and you can buy the book from there. There's a link there, and it takes you to the publisher directly, and then you can order the soft cover or hardcover from the publisher. And the new version is just graphically much better, and there's a little bit of rewriting in there as well. And that's going to be available in ebook too in a couple of weeks. So right now, the original ebook that Michael found is still on Amazon, and that'll remain there. But the newer version is now available too. So,
yay!
Yeah.
That's exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, Peggy, thank you so much for your time today. It's been very useful and a very difficult subject. You've provided some really enlightening tips. I know I'm going to be able to put into practice in my work as well. So thank you so much for that. And Michael, thank you again. And thanks to Knowledge Vision for providing us with this opportunity today. I really look forward to continuing these kind of webinars going on in the future.
No, it's a pleasure, and it's fun to exercise this flipped webinar format a little bit more. This is the third one that we've done. The first two were very successful. I think this one is as well. And I hope to see many of the people who are here at the upcoming training conference. And we'll talk a lot more about this, and we can talk also hands-on about some of the tools that can be used to kind of bring this to reality. For example, the whole process of creating these enhanced interviews.
Absolutely, yeah. I encourage everybody who's going to be anywhere near the Atlanta area during that time to stop in and visit you guys out there. And remember, you can all find out information about the conference by going to just trainingconference.com, and you can download the brochure from there and find out more about the conference where Michael's going to be, as well as many other great speakers. Well, thanks. That pretty much brings us up to the top of the hour. Allow me to thank you all once again for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Training Magazine Network events. Thank you again to Peggy and Michael, and we hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.